Hi, my name is Andi. I'm a chaotic reader, but I'm also someone who buys a few books here and there based on what catches my attention, rather than, let's say, picking up 10 books all at once. In the last couple of months, I have gone on trips to Madrid, Hong Kong, and Budapest, and I want to talk about all the books that I've picked up at these places, plus some other ones that I got here in Vienna. It's quite a sizable stack, I would say, again collected during the last few months, and since I have limited shelf space, as you can see a little bit behind me, I will be doing an unhaul at the end of the video to make space for all of these books, so stay tuned for that. Let's start the list with a book which you have seen before, since I included it in my doom scrolling challenge video when I went book shopping. I'm talking about A Steeping of Blood, the second part of the Blood and Tea duology. I've read the first part in 2024, I believe, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, but somehow I wasn't aware that this was coming out already in 2025 until I caught a glimpse of it in a bookstore in Vienna. I'm excited to dive back into the world that the author has crafted about vampires and tea houses and heists. I hope we stay with the cast of characters that was introduced in the first part, since there we got multiple POVs with cliffhangers that actually worked well to keep up the tension. I mentioned this before, but in my opinion, Hafsa Faisal is the master of writing tension, betrayal and attraction in her plots, evidenced not only by the first part, which is called A Tempest of Tea, but also by her Sense of Arabiya duology, so I have high hopes for this one. Talking about an author whose work I read a lot before, in Madrid I picked up We Solve Murders from Richard Osman. If you watch my 2025 favorites video, I mentioned the Thursday Murder Club series as one of my highlight reads, so I was immediately intrigued when I saw this one. It is the first part of a new series from what I have seen, and it is still about solving murders, and we still have a retired detective, I believe, and his daughter-in-law, who is a private security officer, as our main characters. What made the Thursday Murder Club stand out for me is the character-focused narrative, besides obviously all the clever mystery plotting, and the quick switches between multiple perspectives that set just the right pacing for the story. Here, based on the blurb, we are only working with the retired detective and the private security officer, so I'm curious to see if the author can keep up the snappy, witty flow that characterized his other stories. Every time I sit down, my knee cracks. Can you believe that I'm turning 30 this year? Insane. Now switching to a book and an author that I haven't read but very much wanted to, I finally picked up Piranesi from Susanna Clarke. Despite seeing this book being recommended in videos and reading the blurb, I have a hard time formulating what this one could be about. It is speculative fiction taking place in a house that seems endless, and we have Piranesi as our main character, who is some sort of a record keeper of this house. What sets off the chain of events is someone or something new entering the house, and Piranesi will begin to question everything he knows. Honestly, to me, this seems like a book that will be most enjoyable if I go into it with little knowledge and just let it take me on an adventure. I will report back in one of my reading wrap-ups on how it went. In Madrid, we also went into this bookshop called The Secret Kingdoms, and there I found this special edition of Sense and Sensibility. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that this will be my first Jane Austen book. In high school we learned about Pride and Prejudice and Emma, but never had to read the full books. English not being my first language, I struggled a bit with some phrases when I read The Wuthering Heights in English for the first time last year, having read only the Hungarian translated version back in the days. So let's see how challenging it will be to read Sense and Sensibility. In Hong Kong we went to Eslight or Eslit, which is a bookstore chain. It was a bit difficult to look for English books because the layout was based on genres and topics, and the English books could be found in between Cantonese and Mandarin works, and sometimes they also just had entire tables dedicated to English books. I was searching for local authors, but it was a bit disappointing that the majority of the English titles they carried I could also easily found in Vienna, or to be honest anywhere else. They were rather mainstream. Still, there were a few unique titles that caught my eye, and one I picked up, which is a short story collection titled Love in a Fallen City, published in the 1940s. Now, I admit this is a bit far from the usual books I read, but after picking up Giovanni's Room last year and liking it a lot, I want to broaden my reading horizons a bit by works from the 1940s and 1950s. I feel like a short story collection would be a great way to ease into it. Based on the blurb, a lot of these works are centered around passion, family life, and human relationships with a rather melancholic tone. So that would be a nice break in between high-stakes fantasy adventures that I usually read. Talking about books which are outside of my usual reading comfort zone, I also picked up The Other Girl from a French author. This I have already finished, and it was a difficult read. It is in a letter format addressed to the author's older sister, who died when she was 6, 2 years before the author was born. In parts, it was very heart-wrenching how she acknowledges who she became as a result of this loss in her family. In parts, it also contained a lot of ramblings about the author's childhood. It definitely fits the memoir genre, but expect the narration to be a bit fragmented. With around 90 or so pages, it can be a quick read, but it is a difficult one, and I can imagine that it is also not everyone's cup of tea. Now onto a book which was very much my cup of tea. No surprise that I picked up Wild Reverence from Rebecca Ross and already finished it, as you can see from all the sticky tabs. She's one of my favorite authors, and this was one of my favorite books of 2025. It has all the ingredients that make it a great fantasy and a great love story. We have an elaborate mythology with selfish gods, betrayal and battles, and we have main characters who come from such different experiences. I mean, one of them being divine, the other one being mortal, but they find understanding in each other as they slowly start to trust each other. Rebecca Ross is the master of weaving yearning and longing into her stories, and that came through as well in Wild Reverence. Easy 5-star book, I can only recommend it. And the second book I picked up in Hungary, actually I realized I did them out of order, but The Other Girl and this one I picked up when I was visiting Budapest. It's from Hungarian author Antal Serb, and the English title is Journey by Moonlight, I believe. It was written in the 1930s, and we follow a young Hungarian man as he journeys to Italy on his honeymoon, but also through his internal journey as he tries to make sense of his past, struggling with rebelliousness, but also with the notion of death. It's categorized as literary fiction, focused on the complex themes of identity and existence, as you can see. Back in high school, I read another work from this author, but that was more like a murder mystery / comedy. So I bet this will be very different, both in tonality and when it comes to the plot. So these were all the books I picked up in the last few months. Now it's time to make space for them on my shelves. Actually, starting with Wild Reverence, that's gonna be an easy one because I have my favorite shelf behind me. So that goes immediately to my favorite shelf. Now, let's see the other ones. This is the shelf where I keep all the books that I want to read next. So A Steeping of Blood goes right there, and actually with the painted edges facing outwards because it's so pretty. Piranesi also goes to this shelf. Along with Love in a Fallen City, this I also want to pick up very soon. Look Looking at these books made me realize that it's unlikely that I will pick up The Wolf and the Woodsman anytime soon, so I put it on the shelf above. And Sense and Sensibility, I also want to display it here. Ta-da! This shelf is done. Now we have these two shelves, which house most of the books that my husband and I have, and this is where I will be doing some unhauling, starting with What the River Knows, simply because I read about it and I haven't thought about it, so it's time to pass it along. The Knight and the Moth, it was a disappointing read, but ultimately I decided to keep it. What You Are Looking For is in the library. I actually forgot I had this book, so I put it in a more visible spot. How Do You Live? I thought about giving it away, but then ultimately I decided to keep it. What I will be giving away for sure is Enchantra, because it was also a disappointing read and I see no reason to keep it. Oh, I forgot I had all of these sticky tapes in the back, so I was happy to find them. I was also thinking about passing along my copy of Days at the Morisaki bookshop, but ultimately decided to keep it, same with Better Than the Movies. What I will unhaul though is my copy of Malibu Rising. I read this a couple of years ago and haven't really thought about it since, so it was time to pass along my physical copy. And with this, I have some space again on these bookshelves. Let me know which books you picked up or unhauled lately. See you in my next video. Until then, take care. Bye!